don't resist the machines, harness and embrace them. And I think that ideologically, if you're unwilling to familiarize yourselves with a chat GPT like experience, if you don't want to understand how TikTok is completely disrupting how we engage digitally with media, why? Why are you resisting? Is it because you're stubborn? Is it because you yearn for the past nostalgically when times are simpler? And if you want to continue to remain relevant, don't resist. Figure out a way for you to find peace with those examples, embrace them, learn to utilize what is the balance of human cognition overlaying the baseline that something like AI can provide.
Welcome to today's episode of the Soundcheck. Delighted to have Danny here, who I'm also proud to say is a strategic advisor at Trumpet. Usually I do the intros, but I feel like I'm going to steal your thunder. So I'd love to hand it over to you, hear a bit about your story and take it away.
Oh my God, Rory. I mean, I'm just a humble servant to you. As long as I just make sure I abide by Rory, get back to his emails, I stay out of trouble and I stay off the naughty list. That's probably the biggest bio detail you want. But when I'm not making sure Rory's happy, I find myself as the director of go-to-market enablement at Gong. And beyond that, what else can I tell you, man? You know, a fine appreciator of a gin, ideally distilled by some cool craft distillery. You'll find me on my road bike. And what else can I tell you? I geek out. I don't know what this says about me, but all things behavioral economics and buyer psychology I find riveting.
Nice. And so I've got two questions off the back of that. With gin, your favorite gin cocktail, and then two, buyer psychology, also a big favorite topic of mine. What's your recommended book on that front?
Very good. So on the gin front, because I am an 87-year-old crotchety fart trapped in a 36-year-old body, if it's good gin, I just want it on the rocks with 3 blue cheese stuffed olives, just the juice. I don't want it adulterated. I don't want it watered down with vermouth or some other shrub. No, just give me the good stuff. Maybe intravenously if it's been a long week, but
I've never heard that. Blue cheese stuffed olives.
This is something that I found is got to be something over in America, because when I was in Ireland and in London, I was asking for them and they looked at me like I was crazy. I didn't want to do it. I can bring you a jar. This is one of the more like decadent delicacies in life that you could enjoy. But it's a painstaking exercise where you actually have to take the blue cheese and you have to massage it to almost make it more of a mousse or a creamier cheese. And then you pipette it into the olive. Oh my God, Rory, is it too early to start?
Well, I was about to say, I'm impressed with the energy about this gin cocktail on a Monday morning, but I'll have to check it out because, I mean, those 3 things separately, I'm also a fan of. So there's no harm in putting them together. And then on the book front?
So one of the sacred scrolls that made a dent in the world of business, not even just tech and SaaS, is Daniel Kahneman's Nobel Prize winning research, where he won the prize in 2002 for prospect theory, which is the notion that psychologically we are hardwired as human beings to assign 2 to 3 times more, we'll say, importance, urgency, prioritization to experiences framed as loss than gain. And I think why that's so compelling is it gives us in sales, really anyone, the upper hand to appreciate, well, if naturally, without even consciously recognizing what it is that's happening in our cognitive processing abilities, we want to avoid loss 2 to 3 times more than pursuing gain. How do you just modulate your own language as a seller, as a partner, if you're dating, if you're thinking about the ubiquity of sales? All of a sudden you have the upper hand, and not to say that you're weaponizing this in a mercurial way, but as we all jockey to advance our respective agendas, well, even just using that frame of reference gives you a better fighting chance of seeing your agenda succeed over someone else's. I think that that's so cool that if we just empowered people with that awareness, how much more effective are they in whatever sphere or realm of life they're looking to pursue that given moment, that day, that quarter, whatever.
It's incredibly powerful positioning. I think it touches every department of business without them realizing. Even like a project manager, how am I going to pitch this project to be prioritized over that one? And marketing is sales. You know, it's interesting. People think it's selling is only applicable to salespeople, but really, it's not.
Yeah, I think that diving deeper into our biochemistry and the release of whatever hormones we have when we close that PO, the dopamine, the serotonin, the oxytocin, if you understand what's actually happening underneath the hood, And you can hack into that, not again disrupt it, but find yourself in the slipstream of what is naturally going to occur regardless of your impact and involvement. Then all of a sudden, you're not fighting against the tides. You're just choosing to swim with them. But until we inform people on a scientific level about how this hard wiring is designed, then we're just some other, I'll be honest, white cis male pontificating on stage about whatever sort of subjective opinion I have that's going to make you successful. No, why not actually lean into the science and then reframe that in a way that's contextually relevant to someone who's not coin operated, but motivated in the realm of sales by a quota?
I feel this is already episode 2 in the works that we need to get you back for. I'm loving the passion, and it resembles big time. But we are here today to chat about AI, the big hot topic. You can't really escape it, whether you're on LinkedIn, chatting to friends on WhatsApp, it's everywhere. And, we're thinking about it from a co-pilot or captain perspective. But before we go into that, be quite keen to hear your story of ending up in go-to-market enablement, because I think, one, it resonates with me, but I think it will also resonate with a lot of the audience.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, drew both of us to one another in this kinship that we share, we have backgrounds in hospitality. And hospitality oftentimes, even probably up until the last decade or 5 years, was a blue collar profession. And, you identified as I'm a waiter or I'm a manager in hospitality. I'm even in a maitre d', or unless maybe you achieve some rank in being a sommelier. Generally speaking, people snickered at hospitality. And I'll tell you, my all-time favorite guru, not just in hospitality, but in business, is a guy by the name of Danny Meyer, who wrote the book, if you haven't read it, Setting the Table, which is all about the convergence of service and entrepreneurship in business. And it is only until probably the last few decades been widely recognized as a sacred scroll within the world of business. It can be standard issue at a lot of Ivy League MBA programs. And Danny is very much now considered not just a restaurateur, but a virtuoso in the field of business. Well, it did not occur to me when I even almost sort of reluctantly found myself running restaurants and hospitality that what that is, to your point, it is sales. And it is just a 45-minute sales cycle over and over and over again every night where you are delighting people. And the same laws which govern a successful sales cycle apply to hospitality, just on a much more, we'll say, repeatable, predictable, and sustained flywheel. So that velocity, I could not have predicted. Every time you have a turn at a restaurant, you're starting a new sales cycle. It's just, you don't have to contend with procurement and all the other personas that hijack our sales cycles now. But what it is that you use, whether it's empathy, personalization, all of those things that we're looking to achieve at scale in B2B still apply in the B2C arena that is hospitality. And one of the things that I love so much about the book that Danny writes, he describes this idea of being successful in that world. Some of it is hard skills, like can you carry 3 glasses in your palm and the 4th in your other hand? Do you understand backwards and forwards the nuances of wine? Like when you go to something from the Bordeaux region versus when you go to an Oregon Pinot, how do you delineate those? Yes, we can train you in all those, but what is your, not IQ, what is your HQ and your hospitality quotient? And I think some of us are just born innately, intrinsically with this bend to find more gratification out of serving others than actually even indulging ourselves in some delicacy. And I think that just courses through my veins in a like unapologetically, overtly, like over the top way. And that unpredictably has translated really naturally into how I apply myself, whether as a former seller who carried the bag or even in enablement now. Do you authentically and sincerely serve, whether it's your customers or in my world now, our internal colleagues who we serve?
And do you think the importance of that has been heightened in the last few years since AI has, skyrocketed and become the center stage?
I think that AI is doing the best it possibly can to mimic and imitate what we want to cultivate in that feeling when you read an email that is personalized. And while I don't think that we've totally eradicated the place for human cognition and oversight, AI is getting dangerously close to replicating our style and what used to historically feel really robotic and riddled with typos and errors and miscontext. We're closing that gap exponentially faster. And I think with the proliferation, the popularization of ChatGPT last November to where we stand a year later, man, it's impressive. And not to toot Gong's horn, but an email that our product Engage can write, while not totally buttoned up, bulletproof, perfect, ready to ship, it's closing that gap and then adding an acceleration that a human on the other side of that keyboard can maybe tweak just minorly before it's ready to ship. So my thought, and I can't take credit for this analogy, this goes to Kyle Healy, who is a Gong fan and SVP. He describes the embracing of AI in the same way that Iron Man harnesses the power of technology. And I think in anyone's world that's being not intruded, but enhanced by AI, rather than fighting the machines like we did with the Terminator, we know the fate of how that movie played out. Don't resist the machines, harness and embrace them. And I think that ideologically, if you're unwilling to familiarize yourselves with a chat GBT like experience, if you don't want to understand how TikTok is completely disrupting how we engage digitally with media, why? Why are you resisting? Is it because you're stubborn? Is it because you yearn for the past nostalgically when times are simpler? And if you want to continue to remain relevant, don't resist. Figure out a way for you to find peace with those examples, embrace them, learn to utilize what is the balance of human cognition overlaying the baseline that something like AI can provide.
Absolutely. So it feels like you're very much in the bandwagon of Copilot. Like, rather than fight this, it's time to embrace it. And I think, we've all seen the stat about what a third of our time as salespeople is spent doing admin. And it sounds like, especially how Gong are going about it, it's bringing that number down. So you can spend more time on personalization, more time with customers, and then doing the meaningful work rather than the stuff that, let's be quite honest, just takes time, and it's no, your brain is better spent elsewhere.
For sure. So we have a stat that we use in our messaging. 77% of a seller's time, according to Forrester as recently as this year, is spent on non-selling activities. What do those look like? I can't speak for what Forrester has as an enablement stat. I think we'll defer to your number. But regardless, ubiquitously across all go-to-market teams, we're looking to automate those mundane tasks that we are paid too much to be spinning our wheels doing. And I'll give you a classic example in the case of enablement. You can orient ChatGPT to write you a lesson plan on a given topic, and then even get so specific as to think about, write me a lesson plan for rolling out a 1-hour session with a 5-week follow-on reinforcement plan. And that may not be the gold standard, but heck, it's a really healthy place to start. So you're not starting from an absolute standstill. And for anyone that's breaking into the enablement profession, starting their career there, that isn't going to completely point you in the wrong direction or trajectory. It's going to require that you, regardless of your tenure in enablement, actually go back and comb through it to determine, is this relevant? But at least you can pick and choose parts of that puzzle to then apply to your context, rather than, again, starting with a blank canvas that is paralyzing.
Absolutely. It's like at school when you're staring at a piece of work and you've just done the title and you can't go beyond it. You're kind of stuck. So it almost gets like the template, the first draft ready. So then you can use your expertise properly, tweak it, refine it, and get it to a point where it's a lot more relevant. And Gong as a product, it's AI through and through. It was doing AI before AI was cool and was in everyone's hands. Outside of the product itself, how do you think about like your AI strategy in terms of enablement? Like, what do you encourage reps to do? What do you encourage them not to do? Like, really curious to hear your thoughts and approach.
Yeah. So I think that, tying our last point to this, you can no longer claim you have writer's block if you are willing to unleash what AI can provide. Like the era of being like, oh man, I was just stumbling over my words. It's so much easier to be the editor than it is to be the originator of the content, where the genesis starts with you hitting the keyboard in some prophetic, Hemingway caliber way. I was training up our enterprise team last week on account planning. And this is like, as an enablement exercise, this is a death sentence. Account planning objectively just sucks. It's a necessary evil to us not being shown the door when we're prospecting into organizations. But man, it's not glamorous. There isn't a direct line between typing up your point of view and then getting to President's Club. A lot of other things have to happen. So it feels like a colossal waste of time that's cumbersome and disrupts your flow. What AI is able to do now, when you think about trying to formulate your point of view on an account, cracking into a new business unit, well, you can upload an earnings call that used to take an hour, and even if you wanted to listen to it at 1.5 or 2x speed on the treadmill while you're walking your dog, you still have to process and synthesize what that call looks like. Well, we have an AE at Gong who had the brilliant idea historically before we had Call Spotlight to upload the call into Gong so you could speed it up. Now you upload that call into Gong, Call Spotlight will synthesize it all for you. You don't even need to listen. So as a textbook example, you need to be able to comb through and scrub and surgically dissect whether it's the 10K, whether it's the earnings call, or any number of pieces of collateral that no longer make your prospects anonymous, but it will actually do the baseline synthesis for you. And it's not enough for Gong or whatever tool you're using to simply produce what you're then going to send to the CRO after the earnings call and say, hey, heard you say this, let's talk about that. You need to overlay Gong's baseline synthesis with the human touch. But rather than that being a 2-3 hour exercise, that may be at most a 20 or 30 minute exercise.
That resonates massively. I had it 2 weeks ago. I spent 4 hours taking an annual report, reading the whole thing. I was like, I'm going to really put time into this. Very, very manual way of doing it, putting out all the kind of gems, the quotes, the stats, building that really detailed business plan. Next morning I woke up and I was like, why did I do that? Why did I not put this into ChatGPT and get it to that for me? It took less than a minute to pull out everything that I saw, lots of other points that I missed. And I thought, it beat me, and like hats off to it. That was a way more efficient use of time. So ever since, new learnings on that front. But so there's a couple of good examples there of using it for analyzing voice recordings, for even annual reports. What have you seen in the market that you think is going to be quite widely adopted by reps 2024, that's starting to emerge is kind of the new era of AI outside of ChatGPT, whether it's tools or anything like that you've seen?
Yeah, in our space, I can really only speak for the revenue platform race that we find ourselves in. Like, it is just a slugfest between us and the likes of all the usual suspects that in your revenue tech stack, there's a number of ways to skin this cat now, and a number of vendors who are claiming they all do the same thing. And obviously I work for Gong, so I haven't been there. So I'll try and suppress some of my bias and neutrally offer, if you're an organization, it behooves you to think about from end to end, do you have a tool that is objectively arbitrating, are you having effective correspondence with your prospects and customers over email, Slack, text, conferencing, and so forth. Gong is an example of many CI or RI tools that can do that. And I think where the rubber meets the road is, if you want to stitch together best in breed tool like a Gong alongside then a forecasting tool, of which we now have our own native tool called Forecast, or you can go to the likes of people who have been doing it for longer, Clary being another obvious name in the space. Well, in between being able to comb through and scrub and scrutinize and transcribe all of your correspondence and then tie it back to your forecasting to determine, do I have happy ears, or is this a house of cards, or can I actually scrutinize at scale the hygiene of my deals? The other thing at the front end would be, well, what is my prospecting tool? And again, kudos and credit to Outreach for pioneering that. Well, I would say those three components on top of your CRM, which is table stakes now, those would constitute the three-legged stool that complements that CRM legacy solution. Again, whether it's Salesforce, HubSpot, Dynamics, I don't really have a dog in the fight. The AI, I would say, progression that's going to take place is, how does it tie everything together in that three-legged stool that sits atop your CRM? And we believe, because everything that we have is on the same code base, it's all native to Gong, from engage at the tip of the spear when you reach out to someone with the highest probability of what constitutes a successful outbound message, to can we then coach and identify our reps in real time, what they're doing right and wrong, to then determine if a deal makes it into the forecast, do we believe this? And can we go back through readily, independently, without the rep daisy chaining this loop of telephone? Well, can we say that deal is battle tested and bulletproof? That to us, if you can have AI end to end parsing through every touch point, that to me is going to be what separates the winners and the losers going into next year.
I like that. It's a very powerful way of looking about it. Quite holistic as well.
Yeah, I think that revenue platform play is what we're all chasing. We're all claiming that we're going to offer that. And I think if we can do it and anyone else can do it, great. we're going to see that there have been a lot of people who have run towards this gold rush of conversation intelligence. But if you're only one or two of those three legs, you're not going to have the holistic picture that you described. You need that continuity. And if you're trying to stitch it all together with duct tape plumbing, it'll probably break.
Sounds like it. And let's say you've got all your eggs. Was it ducks in a row? Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
All your ducks in a row, and you've got right solution in play, and everything's kind of talking to each other in harmony. What do you see as the risk from AI moving forward for a business, maybe like Gong, or maybe even like the size of Trumpet? Like, as an individual rep, what would you be communicating to your team from an enablement perspective that is the risk moving forward when leveraging AI?
Yeah. So I think about what ChatGPT has done to my job. So I used to run clinics. Hey, here's a 250-page PDF 10K. How do you extract 2 or 3 nuggets in 20 minutes from it rather than spending, like you said, 4 hours bumbling your way through a lot of fluff and crap that's not going to get you anything that's actually customer facing? They used to teach that to hundreds, if not thousands of AEs. Well, now I can look and I can say, AI is going to make me obsolete. You can just route an entire 10K through ChatGPT and it will seemingly reproduce what Danny would have taught you. I think that there is an inherent danger to farming everything out to ChatGPT in my world, or if you're an AE. And what I'm saying is harness it, capitalize on the efficiencies, but do not become laughably reliant on it to produce all of your work. That there still needs to be a complementary relationship between the human and the AI. And when we find ourselves simply phoning things in based on what is regurgitated from this robot, then I think we are complicit in complacency. And I think that, again, the human component to still being able to maneuver and jockey or shepherd the generative AI, we can't lose that. I think that, again, the AI can be a force multiplier, but it cannot be a full-on replacement.
Yeah, 100% agree. And do you see, rather than like fight it, you're embracing it from an enablement strategy and actually bringing it in and starting to, do you see yourself like educating the team as part of like the strategy in next year?
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about, you need to have in your organization, I think, an ethical discussion, what is and isn't permissible about what we're going to use. And if you haven't already started thinking about, hey, we need to draft this policy, then you're already behind, because if you're in a middle management or senior management role, rest assured, it's already being deployed and adopted in pockets, whether you like it or not. So might as well draw lines in the sand, what is and isn't totally permissible in your organization. But for my world, absolutely. I used to train people on how to dissect 250 pages of a 10K, a lot of which is garbage. Well, instead of training people on how to read 250 pages in 20 minutes, I'm going to train people next year on how to have ChatGPT responsibly and effectively comb through that. That's the new lesson. There still needs to be that conduit, human to human, that we provide. It's just that the content of our curriculum, it may change ever so slightly. We still are responsible for having that warm handshake.
Yeah, that resonates for sure. I think a key part of enablement is the human side of selling, and that seems from yourself a big part of it too. Long may it live, because yeah, God forbid if it's just everyone going to ChatGPT to do everything.
Totally.
Awesome. I feel like we could talk about this all day long, but I am conscious of time. I want to respect your time, Danny. We usually wrap up hearing a couple of things. So we'd love to hear another podcast that you would recommend people to check out, a tool as well that you think everyone should keep their eye on that isn't Trumpet. So I had a feeling that might be your go-to, and then we'll take it from there.
Cool. Podcast that I'm listening to, Jubin, who's over at Sequoia, has grit, and I would say roster of guests that he brings on, I have to credit him because he's adopted a very Guy Raz, how I built this approach to asking the likes of Ali Goetze, who's the CEO of Databricks, or Chris Degnan, the CRO of Snowflake, and all the usual suspects he's bringing on. And I love just, they are raw, they are unapologetically at times brash, but it humanizes these people who we all seemingly envy for the success they've achieved. It humanizes their journeys that were not in any way, shape, or form the yellow brick road. to titanic success. So check out Grit. Big fan of that. I would say Acquired with Ben Gilbert is another great one. They just had Charlie Munger, who's Buffett's buddy, on there. So Ben is doing great things. Also a really scrappy entrepreneur. So Ben, if you're listening, much love to you. On a less like B2B tech side, I am fanboying Dax Shepard to the moon and back. He does Armchair Expert. And without it being fully focused on entrepreneurship and business, he's also doing a lot, I think, from the standpoint of, as men, how do we actually exercise a little bit more authenticity and us being emotional creatures and being vulnerable, and culturally all of the forces that kind of pigeonhole us into this, we must be tough and we must be stoic and we may not show any shred of vulnerability. I think he's doing a lot to break that tendency and stigma. So those are three. But obviously you can find me on LinkedIn if you want what I'm reading or what I'm listening to. I will get back to you right away. So there's that. And then I think your last question was, what's a tool that's really moving and grooving? I am really bullish right now on Rattle, and they're kicking ass and taking names in trying to think about meeting people where they're at, typically in Slack, which is where we like to have our people. We want them in Gong and we want them in Slack every day. And Rattle's doing a lot to create workflows in a really pretty forgiving way that automates in a push rather than a pull fashion the behaviors that we want to reinforce. So if you haven't checked out Rattle, credit to them. They're doing great work.
Yeah, brilliant product, brilliant team. And the last question is, who else should we get on the Soundcheck?
Man. Well, if you could get Jubin or Dax or Ben, I think that'd be a fun place for you to be. Guy Raz, obviously, he's fantastic.
I'll just forward them this podcast and say, Danny said exactly. It had to happen. There we go. Awesome. There's the referral.
The person, all jokes aside, if you can't pull them, that I have the utmost respect for is Vanessa Metcalf out of Toronto, recently promoted to be the VP of Enablement over at Showpad. So Vanessa, if you're listening, lots of love for you and what it is that you're doing. Rory, try and score Vanessa on your next episode.
Sounds good. Awesome. Danny, always a pleasure. We'll catch up soon. And thank you again for joining us on the Soundcheck.